Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something truly shocking. The crash of Air India flight AI-171.
Yeah, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner that went down on June 12th, right after taking off from Ahmedabad.
Exactly. And the scale of it. Over 270 people estimated lost. It's just devastating, potentially one of the worst crashes ever.
It's hard to even comprehend.
So our mission here, is to go deeper than the headlines. We want to piece together exactly what happened, look at the evidence that's come out, and unpack these different theories, sometimes conflicting theories about why.
Right, to give you a full picture, from the flight's last minutes right up to some bigger, long-standing questions in the industry.
And we've got quite a bit to work with. We're looking at flight radar data, some really powerful eyewitness videos.
Statements, too, from passengers on earlier legs,
Yeah.
aviation experts, plus reports from media, government agencies.
Yeah, it's including stuff on Boeing and Air India from before this even happened. It's a lot, but we'll guide you through it.
Okay, so where do we start? The
Yeah.
flight itself.
Let's do that. Let's build that minute-by-minute picture. So the plane, the Dreamliner, VTAN,
Right.
it was already running late on June 12th.
Right. Scheduled for 1:10 p.m. departure to London, but didn't actually push back or start moving until 1:30 p.m.
And this wasn't its first flight that day, was it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It had come in from Paris to Delhi about 12 hours before, then flew Delhi to Ahmedabad that same morning.
And there was something important noticed on that Delhi-Ahmedabad flight, wasn't there? A passenger. Akash Vatsa?
Yes, exactly. He noticed some really strange things. Said the wing flaps were moving up and down constantly.
Constantly during the flight.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
And the AC wasn't working. The whole entertainment system was out remotes too. Completely unresponsive.
Wow. But it landed okay in Ahmedabad.
It did, landed safely. But looking back now, well, it definitely makes you think, doesn't it? Kind of paints a picture.
Absolutely. Adds a layer. Then in Ahmedabad, the refueling took a bit longer than usual.
Yeah, 42 minutes, usually more like 30, 35. Though a DGCA official did say that's not necessarily abnormal for a flight with a full load max payload.
Okay. And the crew. Experience.
Very. Captain Sumit Sabarwal, 8,200 flying hours. Co-pilot Clive Kunder, even more 10,100 hours. Extensive backgrounds.
Which, as you said, makes what happened next even harder to understand.
It really does. So 1:31 p.m., it starts moving to the runway 23. Gets takeoff clearance at 1:34 p.m.
And the checks? All clear.
Pre-flight checks completed 1:38 in 24 seconds. No warnings. Weather was fine. Visibility good. No requests from the crew for anything different. Everything looked normal.
Until it wasn't. Takeoff time.
1:38 in 44 seconds. Wheels up from runway 23.
And then,
Right on.
almost immediately,
Trouble. Just 11 seconds later, 1:38.55. It reached 625 feet and just stopped climbing.
stopped climbing at only 625 feet.
Exactly. Didn't get any higher. And moments after that, the pilots radioed ATC.
The Mayday call.
Yeah. The message was chilling. Thrust not achieved. Falling, falling.
Oh, God. Thrust not achieved.
Then at 1:39 and 13 seconds, it started descending rapidly. Lost contact with ATC.
And the crash.
Just 34 seconds after takeoff. 34 seconds. Came down about 1.5 kilometers from the airport.
Straight into that hostel at BJ Medical College.
Yeah.
In Magnani Nagar, a residential area. And then the fire.
Yeah, immediate massive fire.
34 seconds. It's almost impossible to process how fast that is. From wheels up to impact.
It tells you just how little time the crew had. Whatever happened, it was sudden and catastrophic.
And the scene on the ground. You mentioned the hostel. It was lunchtime.
Yes, around 35 students were in the canteen, which reportedly took a direct hit.
Horrifying. People jumping from windows to escape.
Second, third floor windows, yeah.
Yeah.
Locals described this incredibly loud bang, the ground shaking like an earthquake, then smoke and debris just everywhere. Total chaos.
Amidst all that horror, there was one survivor.
One sole survivor. Bishwas Kumar Ramesh, a British citizen. He was in seat 11A, near an emergency exit. Pure chance, it seems. His side of the fuselage landed facing an open space. He could get out. The other side was apparently blocked by a wall. Just incredible luck in the worst possible circumstances.
Unbelievable story. So, in the immediate aftermath, what's the first thing investigators go for? What's the key evidence?
Always the black boxes. The cockpit voice recorder, the CVR, and the flight data recorder, the FDR. They hold the most critical information about those final moments.
And they were found.
Yes, recovered quickly. India's AAIB, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, is leading the investigation.
Yeah.
They've got help from UK and US teams, too.
And the NTSB from the US is also involved?
Naturally, yes, because it's a Boeing plane, American-made. They're running a parallel investigation.
There was some confusion initially about where the boxes would be analyzed, right?
Yeah, some early reports said they were going to the U.S., but the aviation ministry clarified they would be investigated in India.
Okay. So beyond the black boxes, what else gives immediate clues? You mentioned videos.
Crucial visual evidence, yes. Two main videos surfaced. There's airport CCTV, lower quality, but it shows the whole sequence from takeoff to the crash.
And the other one?
A much clearer, higher quality video shot by a 17-year-old Aryan from his rooftop nearby. And that video shows some really significant things almost immediately.
Okay, let's get into that. What did Arian's video show that was so critical?
Two really striking anomalies. First, the plane's landing gear. It was still down, deployed after takeoff.
Which is not normal.
Highly abnormal. Pilots retract the gear almost right away to reduce drag, help the plane climb faster. Leaving it down is a major red flag.
Okay, that's one thing. What was the other?
Even more critical, arguably. The wing flaps. The video clearly shows they were retracted, pulled in, not deployed.
Retracted. Wait, flaps are supposed to be out for takeoff, right? To generate lift.
Exactly. You deploy flaps for takeoff, and landing they increase lift, but also drag. You retract them when you're cruising at altitude. Having them retracted during takeoff would make it incredibly difficult for the plane to gain height.
Which matches the flight data, reaching only 625 feet.
Precisely. So those visuals, landing gear down, flaps retracted, were huge early clues.
Okay, so we have these visual clues, the Mayday call about thrust. What theory started forming? Pilot error was mentioned early on, wasn't it? Like maybe they forgot the gear in panic or retracted the flaps by mistake.
Those ideas were floated, yeah.
Yeah.
But aviation experts and pilots pretty quickly started pushing back on that.
Why?
Well, for one, the Dreamliner has sophisticated warning systems. If the flaps weren't set correctly for takeoff, there would have been loud, clear alarms in the cockpit.
Ah, okay. Warnings they couldn't ignore.
Exactly. And given the huge experience level of this crew making such a basic error, especially with warnings likely blaring, it just seems highly improbable.
Highly improbable, but not impossible. Could extreme stress cause?
Look, human factors are always a consideration in any investigation. But the evidence seems to be pointing much more strongly towards a major system failure. Plus, Captain Sohail Handa, an expert, made a good point. He said a Dreamliner should actually be able to get to 600 feet, even without flaps deployed properly.
Really?
And that even one engine, if the other failed, should provide enough power to climb higher than 625 feet. So his take was that whatever was happening was much bigger than just flaps or gear being wrong.
Okay, so if it's likely not simple pilot error, what is the leading thinking? You mentioned system failure?
The strongest evidence seems to point towards a total loss of power. And the biggest clue for that comes back to Arian's video.
What else did it show?
On closer look, analysts believe they can see something deploying from underneath the plane. A ram air turbine. A rat.
Oh, right. Okay, what is that? Sounds like an emergency thing.
It absolutely is. It's a small wind turbine, basically, tucked away in the fuselage. It's designed to deploy automatically if all main power sources fail. Electrical, hydraulic, both engines gone.
Like a last resort.
Exactly. It uses the airflow from the plane moving to spin a small propeller, which generates a very limited amount of emergency power. Just enough to keep essential flight controls working, hopefully giving the pilots enough time to glide to a safe landing.
But it didn't help here.
Tragically, no. The plane was just too low, 625 feet, and too slow, and the whole flight was only 30 seconds long after that point. The R simply couldn't spin up enough or provide power long enough to make a difference. There was no time, no altitude to work with.
That's incredibly grim. So the R deploying confirms the power loss, but it couldn't save them? Is there other evidence supporting the R deployment?
Yes. Remember the survivor, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. He reported hearing a loud bang just before the crash and seeing the lights flicker.
Right.
Well, Captain Steve Scheibner, another expert, suggested that bang could have been the R hatch deploying. It's quite forceful. And flickering lights are also consistent with the R kicking in and drawing on backup power systems.
And the video audio.
Yes, that too. When you isolate the sound from Arian's video and compare it to normal 787 engine noise, analysts say there's a distinct, sort of propeller-like whirring sound mixed in, consistent with the RA spinning.
Okay, so strong evidence for the RA deploying, meaning total power failure. Why would that happen? What causes a RA to deploy?
There are generally three main triggers: total electrical failure, total hydraulic failure, or dual engine failure. Both engines quitting.
And given the pilot's call, thrust not achieved.
Dual engine failure becomes a very strong contender, even though it's incredibly rare. Thrust is engine power, The forward force. If they weren't getting thrust, that points directly at the engine.
And the landing gear staying down could also fit that. Not enough power to retract it.
It could certainly be a symptom, yes. The systems needed power that might not have been available.
So let's explore that dual engine failure possibility. What's the main theory for why both engines might fail?
Right now, the theory getting the most attention from experts is fuel contamination.
Contaminated fuel, like water or dirt in the jet fuel.
Exactly. Could be water, could be sediment, rust particles, even microbial growth if fuel sits too long. Or sometimes, incredibly, other fluids like diesel exhaust fluid can get mixed in accidentally during handling.
And that would just clog things up.
Precisely. Clog fuel lines, filters, injectors. Starve the engines of clean fuel, leading to reduced thrust or complete flameout. As Jay Muralidhar, formerly with the National Aerospace Labs in India, specifically mentioned this possibility.
Has this happened before with a Dreamliner?
There was an incident, yes. March 2019, a 787 in Japan. Dual engine malfunction due to suspected fuel contamination. They landed safely, thankfully, but it shows it's possible.
And if it was contaminated fuel in Ahmedabad, who's responsible?
The focus would immediately shift to the fuel suppliers at the airport, Indian Oil, Farah Petroleum, Reliance, and their fuel testing procedures. They're supposed to be rigorous checks.
Okay, fuel contamination is one major theory. What else could cause total power loss?
Another possibility is a catastrophic electrical failure. A senior pilot mentioned the variable frequency starter generators, or VFSGs. They're complex, vital parts of the 787's electrical system.
And if they failed?
They power almost everything, including the electronic engine controls. So even if the engines themselves were mechanically okay, a VFSG failure could effectively shut them down by cutting off their control systems.
Is there a backup for that?
Yes, the auxiliary power units, the APUs. They can provide backup power, but they take about 90 seconds to start up fully.
An AI-171 didn't have 90 seconds.
It's not even close. Maybe 30 seconds at most from the first sign of trouble. So if it was an electrical failure like that, the APUs wouldn't have had time to come online and help. The pilots would lose control very quickly.
That reminds me of the issues back in 2013, the battery problems.
Exactly. The lithium-ion battery fires on those Japanese Airline 787s.
Yeah.
Smoke in the cockpit, emergency landings. That led to the entire Dreamliner fleet being grounded globally. It was found to be a manufacturing defect by Boeing back then. So electrical system vulnerability isn't unprecedented for the 787.
Okay, so fuel contamination, electrical failure. What's the third angle? Mechanical issues or manufacturing defects?
That's definitely on the table, too. You might remember Norwegian Airlines back in 2020. They were very public about accusing Boeing of ongoing engine problems with their Dreamliners.
I do recall that. Lots of issues.
They cited flight diversions, route closures, having to replace engines way too often, and even scrapping one plane that was only 10 years old because of persistent issues.
But isn't the 787 generally considered safe?
Overall, yes, as a very good safety record, which makes this crash, tragically, the first ever fatal crash involving a Dreamliner, even more shocking.
So if it was a manufacturing defect this time, blame goes to Boeing.
Primarily, yes.
Yeah.
But if it turns out to be a maintenance issue, something that should have been caught or fixed.
Then who? Air India.
Potentially, Air India Engineering Services Limited. It's actually a separate government-owned company that does most of the maintenance for Air India's 787s, even though Tata owns Air India itself now. So it gets complicated.
Okay, multiple complex theories. Let's zoom out slightly. What about this specific plane, VTANN? Did it have known issues?
It did, unfortunately. There's a documented history. Back in November 2021, it had a fuel leak mid-flight, had to make an emergency landing in Turkey.
A fuel leak. Interesting, given the contamination theory.
Indeed. And there were earlier reports about issues with windshield cracks and also battery overheating problems, similar to the ones that caused the 2013 grounding.
And then there's that passenger, Akash Vatsa, seeing problems just hours before the crash. The AC, the entertainment system.
Right. All pointing to an aircraft that might not have been in peak condition on its final flights.
What about its maintenance schedule? When was it last properly checked?
Its last major, comprehensive C-check was 2 years ago, June 2023. More recently, the right engine was apparently repaired in March 2025, and the left engine inspected in April 2025. The next big jack wasn't due until December 2025.
Now, beyond VTANN, there have been broader concerns raised about Boeing's 787 manufacturing for years, haven't there?
Yes, quite serious ones. Al Jazeera did an investigation alleging the FAA, the U.S. regulator, allowed Boeing to introduce new features like those lithium-ion batteries onto the Dreamliner without the usual rigorous testing, even after they reportedly failed twice in just 10 days early on.
That sounds rushed.
Raises questions about oversight, definitely. And then you have the whistleblowers, current and former Boeing employees.
Like Sam Salapore.
Yes, the engineer who filed an FAA complaint just this April 2024, he alleged that sections of the 787 fuselage weren't joined properly, creating a risk they could break apart midair.
Why weren't they joined properly?
He claimed it was due to parts being made in different places to save costs, and they just didn't fit together perfectly. He said supervisors ignored his warnings.
And there were others before him.
Oh, yes. A 2019 New York Times report detailed claims from workers at Boeing's Charleston, South Carolina factory, a key 787 plant. They alleged shoddy work using faulty parts, leaving metal debris inside new planes.
Metal debris, near wiring.
One technician, Joseph Clayton, said he found metal shavings near cockpit wiring and refused to fly on the plane himself. Another quality manager, John Barnett, who worked at Boeing for over 30 years, bluntly stated he didn't think any plane coming out of that Charleston factory was truly safe or airworthy.
That's incredibly damning, coming from insiders.
Al Jazeera even did a hidden camera investigation where 10 out of 15 Boeing workers they spoke to admitted they wouldn't fly in the Dreamliners they were building because of quality concerns.
Wow, and didn't Barnett make some kind of prediction?
A very chilling one. He suggested that the consequences of cutting corners on manufacturing might not show up immediately, that it could take 10 or 12 years for a major accident to happen as a result.
And AI-171, the plane that crashed, how old was it?
11 years old. Delivered in early 2014, right in that time frame Barnett mentioned.
That's disturbing. And there was something else about planes built around then going overseas.
Yes, a quote attributed to Cynthia Kickens, another former quality manager from Charleston. She was worried about 11 specific Dreamliners built in 2012-2013, including 6 sold to Air India. She said she asked a manager if he'd let his own family fly on them.
And the reply?
Allegedly, he said, "No, these planes are staying in America. They're all going overseas."
That implies a different standard of safety depending on where the plane is sold. That's awful.
It's a deeply troubling remark, suggesting a potential disregard for passenger safety in, as he put it, developing countries. And VTAN, the crashed plane, was delivered January 31st, 2014. That falls right into the period when another investigator raised concerns about potentially flawed planes going to Air India. Coincidence? Maybe. But it adds to the unease.
It certainly fuels the long-standing criticism that Boeing sometimes prioritizes profits and production speed over safety. We saw the devastating consequences with the 737 MAX crashes.
346 lives lost in those 2 crashes. It led to that huge $1.1 billion settlement with the U.S. Justice Department. So yes, the historical context is significant.
But it's crucial to say this isn't just about Boeing, right? You mentioned other airlines fly Dreamliners without these kinds of catastrophic issues.
That's a really important point. Air India has had its own share of internal challenges, even after the Tata Group took over ownership, aiming to turn things around.
What kinds of challenges are we talking about?
Well, there have been ongoing complaints about pilot fatigue, pilots feeling they don't get enough rest between demanding schedules.
That's a safety concern in itself.
Absolutely. And remember, just last May 2024, when around 300 Air India Express crew members staged that mass sick out, turned off their phones, everything, it pointed to some serious internal unrest and potential operational strain.
And wasn't there something about safety audits?
Yes, very concerning. In July 2023, the DGCA, India's aviation regulator, found Air India had submitted fake audit reports. They claimed audits had been done on 13 safety points, when in fact they hadn't been done at all.
Fake safety reports. That erodes all trust.
It's a major violation in an industry built on meticulous checks and safety protocols. And then, literally the day before the AI-171 tragedy, there was a suspected food poisoning incident on an Air India flight from London to Mumbai. 5 passengers, 2 crew fell ill. It just adds to a picture of ongoing operational hurdles.
So it really sounds like a complex web. Potential issues with the manufacturer, potential issues with maintenance, potential issues with airline operations.
Exactly. Plane crashes, especially modern ones, are almost never down to one single thing failing. The systems are designed with so much redundancy, so many backups. For something this catastrophic to happen, it usually means multiple layers of safety failed. A terrible convergence of factors.
It's a sobering reality. So where do we go from here? What's the next step in finding answers?
The focus is now squarely on the investigation and the analysis of those black boxes, the wreckage, all the data. We should get a preliminary report soon.
When is that expected?
International guidelines, under ICO, usually call for a preliminary report within 30 days of a crash. So we'd be looking around July 12th, 2025 for those initial findings. It won't be the final word, but it should give us the first solid evidence-based insights from the investigators.
Something concrete to look forward to, at least.
Yes. And while we wait, it really leaves us all with a critical question to think about, doesn't it?
Which is?
In this incredibly complex world of aviation, where hundreds of lives depend on everything working perfectly, on standards being met without fail, how do we as passengers, as citizens, ensure that accountability is upheld? How do we make absolutely sure that human lives are always, always prioritized over profits or schedules or cutting corners, especially when the potential problems can stretch across giant manufacturers, airlines, and even the regulators meant to oversee them all?
That's a heavy question, and one without easy answers, especially after a tragedy like this. Something for all of us to keep pondering.